everybody. Just with the Three Geeks podcast. I have Phoebe Xavier here promoting her comic Vikings. How are we doing, Phoebe?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Justin.
Of course. Happy to have you. I'm super interested to talk about your book. I'm a big fan of Vikings, more the mythology than maybe the historical aspect of it. Probably like a lot of folks that are listening to this podcast. But I'd love to delve into kind of your melding of the histories of Vikings as well as kind of talk about your book and kind of where it originated from, right? I'm sure there's a love of Vikings there, but do you want to talk a little bit more about it?
Yeah, sure. So this book is the brainchild of the artist who did all the line art. That would be Jose Ernesto Diaz. He is an artist that works out of Guatemala City in Guatemala. And he was seeking a publisher for his comic book in a Facebook forum. There's a lot of forums out there on Facebook that connect artists with either publishers or writers or colorists, etc. And he I don't know who else might have responded to his post, but I was very interested based on the art that I saw. I think that he didn't really have a full book when he pitched it to me. He basically had like 40 pages worth of artwork that I was happy to work with. I told him, we got to develop a narrative arc out of this. So I stepped in as an editor, as the scripter, and eventually I lettered it as well. But the art itself is what inspired me to be a part of this. And as far as it was his idea. He wanted to do a Vikings book, and he wanted it to be historical. I think one of his older jobs, one of his older career turns, was like as a book salesman, and he was like he used to sell books to educational, schools. He used to sell to different types of schools, and he had the idea that we would do the same with this.
Oh, awesome! So, did you have to do a lot of research into like the historical the Viking history to kind of write your narration and kind of do the paneling and stuff like that? How did that go?
A little bit, yes. A lot of it was already there, but not necessarily in an order that made sense as a narrative arc. So he had a friend that he was working with previously who is actually academically involved in archaeology in Europe and has been to some of these Viking sites. And so some of the facts that wind up in the book are because of firsthand knowledge from a friend of Jose's. But a lot of it also was just hours of me on the internet reading and learning different aspects of the history that I didn't know before. And I remember at one point we were in the narration, I knew that we were describing smoking meats, that smoking meat was a common way that they preserve meat. And I was like, Jose, I don't know how we put that on panel. I don't know what smoking meat looks like, but let's find out what that looks like and do a panel of that. Yeah. So even some of the things that come across in text to me in my research, then I have to go back to him as the artist and be like, well, how are we going to represent this visually on the page?
Yeah, that's awesome. So is this kind of your first foray into Kickstarter? Because this is on Kickstarter. I'll make sure the link and everything is in the video description as well as in the banner in the video. But have you done this before? Have you Kickstarted a project before? How's that going?
I think this is maybe my 5th or 6th attempt, and I think actually I'm 2 for 4 maybe on my own account insofar as which ones I took seriously. But also Jeff, who helped set up this interview, works with me on a lot of books, and we did kickstart Moloch #2. That was under his Vector Comics account, so I kind of count that as a victory because I helped see it through to the finish line, but that doesn't count in my statistics of successful Kickstarters.
Sure, fair enough. So I am very interested because I'm sure you did a lot of research for the Viking historical. I think you just mentioned that. What's probably the most inaccurate portrayal in pulp culture that kind of your research kind of maybe uncovered potentially? What is TV shows and movies get wrong, maybe if you want to get into it?
Okay, So I would say like what we would have to discuss probably is that Vikings TV show that ran for 6 seasons, and then it
Sure.
now has the Valhalla
Yeah.
sequel. And as much as they depict certain historical events that really happened, or like Ragnar Lothbrok's death is recorded as him dying in a pit of snakes, which is what they portrayed in the show. But like so much of it, they either switch the dates or they just like throw a character who's like 70 years in the future, like into this part of their history. They're like, that guy definitely wasn't born yet, but interesting character to throw in.
Yeah.
Or the way that they've like over concentrated on uh, Eric the Red's daughter, Leaf's sister in the Paula series. There is a part of one of the sagas where they talk about that they made it to North America, what they refer to as Vineland, because grapes grew wildly there, and that she did fight off like a few Native Americans and like won a battle for them there. But the extent to which they glorify her and make her like a central figure in Jomsburg, or as a Joms Viking, like that's not accurate. Yeah, so like Jomsburg was a real place, and I think they've actually nailed down where the historical Jomsburg was now. They believe that it was over the border of Poland, just over the border into Poland. But yeah, Eric the Red's daughter was not like this holy queen there that like fought for the rights of the average Joms Viking. And the same in a lot of the Vikings, the original one. Even though we have certain tales about the sons of Ragnar, there's no accounting for Ivar the Boneless. Ivar the Boneless is never known to have gone to Russia and made best friends with the king of Russia or whatever. Although Rus Vikings, that's totally a thing. Those are Swedish Vikings that sailed down the rivers into what is now Ukraine. That actually the modern word slave comes from the fact that the Rus Vikings enslaved the Slavs.
Oh,
And
wow.
so yeah, that's how that word made it into our vocabulary. Yeah. So another thing people might not know historically is the Vikings not only like made it to Ireland and like would fuck with Ireland regularly. I hope I'm allowed to curse. Sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
Would mess with Ireland regularly. They also had a slave trading outpost in what is now Cork, Ireland. That was like a huge Viking slave trading market. I think there's also a part of like modern Dublin that they're like, oh yeah, that's the old Viking part of town that like they just established their own little part of that city that was growing at the time.
Oh, wow. That's wild. That's cool. Has that been your favorite part of like making this book? Is
Yeah.
like learning all these random like Viking facts that you can just like spit out and be like, hey, you know that TV show is wrong, right? Like that's probably pretty fun. I imagine. I definitely.
It is fun. It is fun, definitely. I watch a lot of archaeological videos in general, so like I'm always learning some new fact that I'm like, oh, did you happen to know this? And like I am like a pull out facts to discuss like with people to make chat each day. There are a couple really good YouTube channels that I've been watching that are very interested in deep hominid archaeology. So like, when did we diverge from Neanderthals, the Denisovans, and other like ancient man, like not like 20,000 years ago, but like 200,000 years ago. So yeah, there's a couple channels that I watch to absorb those details. And that's also the reason why Jose's friend, who is an archaeologist, eventually left the project, because I was bringing certain facts from my research. He's like, yeah, that's not everyone believes that necessarily. But my understanding of this type of historical archaeological perspective is the popular consensus changes regularly, like based on new findings. Like we now think that North America was occupied by, like humans were on North America at least 23,000 years ago. Whereas up to 10 years ago, they thought it was only 12,000 years. Sure. So like every week, every day, new information is brought to the table. And yeah, so the historical understanding through archaeology is something that shifts constantly.
Sure. It's science in general, right? You gotta research, Hypothesize. That's cool. So I did dig through your Kickstarter, and the art and stuff is super cool. Like, how did you guys determine like what pieces and like the structure there, or like? I really like the idea of kind of getting a hand-drawn thing with the book or whatever. I think that's pretty nifty.
Thanks. I brought one to show you guys.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah, we're offering original artwork, which is like this. This is a 14 by 17 inch poster image. And this one is already, someone already picked up this reward, but it was just like such incredible artwork. And early on, I had that idea like, hey, Jose, if you're doing these in ink on paper, send me a handful of them, like send me what you can. And so he sent like 16 of them that I have currently, and almost all of them have already been taken in the Kickstarter. But we have a few left that are still available, and Jose has another 4 or 5 that he took pictures of that he can send me. That I'm going to put up in the last week for to just make sure we still have some of those art samples if anybody wanted to pick them up. But I happen to send it to one of my friends who's an artist that's worked on other comic books with me. He was like, I just got a new apartment. I need new art on my walls. Like, this looks great. Thank you. And, supported the campaign.
That's awesome. I mean, it is very cool. If folks check out
Kickstarter, I do think it's a great reward. It's a one-of-a-kind thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So anything else you want to talk about with the Vikings project? Anything you want to call it? Anything like, what was the funnest part of making this stuff? Was it structuring the story and making it all make sense in a flow with the panels you already had created? Or what did you most enjoy about it?
It's always rewarding to get to the end of a project and be like, hey, we had an idea and now we've actually executed, come through, and we have a final product now that is 22 pages plus 2 pages of advertisement. So it's a 24-page comic book. And I think getting to the finish line is the most satisfying part. There was a little bit of back and forth, like, okay, Jose, I need these images, and now to supplement those images, can you do a couple extra panels?
Sure.
So I did have to, as a scripted more, have to go back and ask for certain specific panels. And he always came through, delivered quickly and beautifully rendered art.
Yeah, the art really is incredible. I'll add some stills from your Kickstarter onto the screen too when we edit this thing. But this is awesome. Is there forgive me. Let's say when this project gets backed, is there a volume 2 that you guys are already kind of thinking up, or is this kind of a one shot when it comes to comic books? Is the Viking history, I mean, that's 300 plus years of stuff. I'm sure you can probably draw plenty of stuff in from that.
This one is a one-shot. This is definitely just a one-shot. However, I sort of, at the very end of this one, I talk about how the next serious age would be the Crusades that would last for several hundred years.
That'd be fun.
And that, like, the most interesting war going on after the Vikings age would be the Crusades. So maybe we'll do a one-shot of that someday. But we also have taken on, we're going to do a fiction Viking book, fiction and fantasy book, which since in their legends, in the sagas, they kind of believed in elves and dwarfs and stuff like that. I have a dark elf, like what would be in Dungeons and Dragons term, a drow, and he is best friends with Yule Cat. If you've ever heard of Yule Cat, he's a giant cat that eats children on Christmas if they don't have new clothes. So I'm teaming up Yule Cat, a drow elf, and some Christian Vikings, and they're going to try to sail through the Arctic Circle from Iceland across the top of Asia. And it's going to be called Vikings, the Arctic Passage, and we're going to do a couple issues. I got a lot of ideas there, and we already have a lot of the characters designed. And so that's me and Jose's next project.
That sounds incredible. Please reach back out when that thing gets kicked off, because that sounds super fun. Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for being a part of this. Thanks for chatting with me. It's been great.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thanks, everyone, for listening. This is the 3 Geeks Podcast interview. See you.